Kaylin was the piece that completed my dream to have a boy and a girl, and she was bright and articulate and fun and beautiful and everything that any mother would be proud of. She really enjoyed anything that Taylor would do, her brother. She loved shoes, sunglasses, jewelry. She would go through shoe magazines at 3 years old and just look at the shoes and point out the ones that she wanted, and playing dress up and all the little girly things that little girls love. She was into that. She was a fan of Hannah Montana. She thought she had a little pair of boots that were black and sparkly, and when she first saw the Hannah Montana movie, she thought that Hannah Montana was copying her. She got really upset that Hannah Montana had copied her boots. So she was into that, and she liked My Little Ponies and Dora and all the things that little 3-year-old girls love. One of the things that I always enjoyed the most was when I would see her at the end of the day, and she would just run up with her arms out and, "Mommy," and she'd just be so happy, and her eyes would light up when she'd see you. And that was always one of my favorite parts of my day, was waiting for that. And I just loved everything about her. There wasn't any one thing that I could pinpoint, but Kaylin was attending daycare, and that's where I met the person that ended up killing her. We were in a relationship for about 7 months and had just moved in together the same month that she was killed. She seemed to really like him. She seemed to, the same reaction that I would get when I would pick her up. She would run, and then towards the end, the daycare had said, "Well, last time he came to pick her up, she really cried and didn't want to go with him." And we just kind of thought she was, throwing a fit and didn't want to go with him, and didn't really think much of it. And 2 weeks later, we never will know what really happened to her, and that's one of the hardest parts about it. But 2 weeks later, she was brain dead, and we had to take her off life support. And sorry. I was at work. It was approximately, I think, 1:20 in the afternoon, and I got a call on my cell phone, actually like 5 different phone calls on my cell phone, and we weren't supposed to answer our cell phones at work, but I saw that it was that person. So I called back on my work phone, and he said, "There's something wrong with Kaylin. She's not okay." And I didn't really know what that meant. I said, "What do you mean? What happened?" And he said that she had fallen down the stairs and that she wasn't breathing. So I just left. I hung up the phone, ran out of work, drove probably 90 miles an hour the whole way home, saying, "I hope she's okay, I hope she's okay," over and over. And then I got there and found her in her bed, and she was struggling to breathe, and she was unconscious, and her eyes were rolled back into her head, and I just knew from my medical training that she was right on the brink of death at that point. She didn't have any real visible injuries at that time. The bruises developed later, but she was in dire need of the medical help that they were giving her. They were trying to, help her breathe, and they were taking her to the ambulance, and I just went with her. I didn't really have anything else on my mind except for her at that point. But he came later, and he was crying and hysterical and genuinely seemed like not a guilty person at that point. But later that day, he started asking me to lie for him. He had left the hospital to go, later I find out, to go clean up her blood and change his clothes and try to cover his tracks. And then he came back and then he was removed from the hospital, and I find out later that he had confessed to doing that to her. Then the neurosurgeon came and explained to us the type of injury that she had, which was a subdural hematoma, bleeding in the brain, and severe swelling of the brain from being left to lay in her bed, dying for hours. They described to us that the impact that would have been required from a fall for that to happen would have been like falling out of a 10-story window, and that she had some of the worst brain damage that they'd ever seen. The surgeon explained to us that he had seen a child whose head had been run over by a car that didn't have brain damage as severe as Kaylin had. So we don't really know the truth of what happened to her, but what we know is that she suffered a significant blow to the head at the hands of the person that was convicted of her murder. They later lined the bruising on her head up with the dent in the wall, which was 2-inch thick concept home sheetrock. So it took a great deal of force to even dent that wall. And for the injuries to match up, her body had to be turned sideways. So you're standing up, so she would have had to be like swung by her feet into that wall for those injuries to happen the way that the bruising and the dent in the wall matched up. She had bruises that developed several days later that were around her torso and just under her chin, inside of her lip. So she had been beaten before that final blow to her head, but we will never know, I don't think, what she had to go through, which is, again, one of the hardest parts, wondering how long she was awake, how long she suffered prior to that blow that knocked her out. How long was he beating her before she finally got to get away by being unconscious? We were praying for our miracle. She had the surgery, and they said it would just be, a waiting game. And they were doing CAT scans and brain studies, and it wasn't looking good. They told us that she probably wouldn't survive. But we were hopeful, and we were praying, and we were all putting everything that we had into that she was going to come out of this and she would be okay. And they said that even if she was okay, even if she made it, she would never be the same. She would be mentally retarded and probably blind and have damage that would make her never be the same bright little girl that she was. I think it was 5 days in the hospital, and it's all kind of a blur to me still. But the organ donation team showed up and started talking to us about organ donation, and that was, to me, the only good that could come out of the situation. And so we started making those decisions. They had to do testing to ensure that was, that she was never going to recover. I wanted to be sure that I wasn't giving up on her. And they did the gold standard of brain studies the day before we had to say goodbye, and they said there's no brain function at all. Not a little bit, not enough to give us hope, just nothing, none. So we did take her off life support, and she had her organ donation surgery that day, and they let me hold her for about an hour before she went for her surgery, and that hour was spent promising her that we would do whatever we could to make sure it didn't happen to other families, and apologizing to her. Sorry for putting her in that situation. Sorry. And then they took her, and that was the last time I saw her. I thought I was doing all the right things, being with somebody with a stable job that wasn't using drugs or drinking or, doing all the right things. And I was finishing up nursing school, and I had my boy and my girl, everything that I ever wanted, and thought it was all good. And, me and this person had talked about getting married and all this stuff. And I think that waking up that day, that would have been the last thing that I could have ever expected. Hindsight's always 20/20, and I've learned a great deal since then of what to look for. And there were signs that he had reported to other people that never got back to us that could have saved Kaylin's life. If somebody had reported to us the mental illness that he had that we weren't aware of, and told us about the homicidal thoughts and tendencies that he had reported, if even one person had mentioned that to me, we would have been out of there, and Kaylin would still be here today. It was difficult to know that they were going to present things like her bloody Tinkerbell blanket and his boot with her blood and hair on it. Just makes you wonder how it got there, what she had to go through, and his clothing with her blood on it, and the dents in the walls, and the pictures of her at the hospital, and the pictures of her before she was hurt. It was really difficult to watch and know that those were the things that were being presented, but it was very concrete. And hearing the stories of the surgeon that was saying it was the worst brain damage that he'd ever seen, and hearing the expert witnesses talk about the evolving story, which we had heard, it all made it very real, and made me realize the horrible things that had transpired. That day that he was sentenced was the day that the door opened for us to be allowed and be able to do things in her honor to try to prevent this from happening. She's here with us all the time. Everything we do, she's a part of it. Every day that we get up and fight for kids, she's the driving force behind it. She's still here every single day. There's, her memory is very much alive to all of us. And so we've been able to try to move forward with her loss and try to make it mean something, try to make it not be senseless, and do that by trying to protect other children and ask people to be diligent and watch for the signs of abuse, and try to learn what the signs of abuse are so that nobody else has to experience this. Her organs were donated, so there are 3 other children that are alive right now because of her. So that's always a comfort to me to know that her heart is still beating, and that she's still doing wonderful things for other families in this world, and so she's still very much alive to us. The main message that we have that we want to express to people is just to speak out. Silence is what perpetuates violence. Secrecy is what perpetuates these crimes. So if you suspect something or you know that something is going on, use your voice. These little kids don't know how. They don't know what abuse means, most of them, the littler ones. And the ones that can't speak have no way of protecting themselves. They rely on us. And we can't rely on the system that's been set up solely to solve this problem. It's up to all of us to step up and do something about this and just use our voices because they can't.
They don't have a voice. You do. Speak up. Call your local family services if you suspect child abuse.
Kaylin's urn is in my home, in my bedroom actually, because I don't know where I'm going to end up in this world. and I don't want to leave her behind. He stood next to her bed with a priest and actually held the hand of a priest while we all prayed for her life. Somehow he didn't get struck down right there, but it's not something that I would wish on my worst enemy. It's horrible and it's devastating, and it is very impactful, but not something that I would want people to try to imagine. And when they say they're sorry, I say, so am I. I think she was already safely wrapped in the arms of Jesus long before that. My hope is that he was with her from the moment that her head hit that wall, and that she was gone, and that she could see, from heaven what was going on long before then. That she was, I hope that she wasn't suffering, that she wasn't hearing anything. I hope she was already gone. But yeah, I think she knows our intent.